married or in a committed relationship? Looking for real advice on having love and enriching your relationship? You are in the right place. Welcome to The Couples Expert with Stuart Fensterheim.
Hello, and welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast. This is Stuart Fensterheim, the Couples Expert. I am really excited today to bring back onto the podcast one of the people that always gets an incredible response, and that's Jim Thomas. Jim Thomas is an EFT trainer, supervisor, and just all around really good guy who comes on the show, volunteers his time, and he and I always have these lively conversations. Today, what we're going to be talking about is sexuality, conflict, pornography. Neither one of us are an expert in the field of porn addiction, but what I wanted to do is bring Jim on because when he and I get together and begin these conversations, they always are very lively. The feedback that I have gotten is it's one of the best podcasts that people really listen to because they see the two of us really invested in trying to share with my audience, you guys, helpful advice, helpful suggestions, and really an understanding that who you have as a partner is going to be someone who you care more about, feel like there's someone in your life that loves you more than anybody else that you can imagine, and no one else you want to be with than them. And when it comes to the area of sexuality, having a partner that you can express both your emotional love as well as your physical relationship with your partner, where the playfulness is really the thing that has both of you really recognizing that nothing's more fun and that the two of you together, naked or not naked, really have a relationship that's quite special. So what we're going to be talking about and why I'm so excited to have Jim here is to get his insights, his thoughts, his experience as a couples counselor for over 30 years. So together, we have about a half of a century worth of experience to really draw on to help every single one of you have the most incredible, loving sexual relationship out there. Jim also has a practice of his own called Engaging Couples Counseling, which is in Lakewood, Colorado. He's the director of the Denver Family Institute. And most importantly, he is recognized as one of just over 30 certified EFT trainers in the world. He brings a really diverse background to his work. He has now been involved in introducing hundreds of therapists to EFT in the Colorado area. And I met Jim because he was involved in my training when I was being brought up and gone through what they call core skills, which is the integral part of your training as an emotionally focused therapist. And I really owe Jim a big gratitude for helping me really find EFT and understand that the people in the couples counseling field with the specialization in attachment model. So I'm excited to bring him on. And Jim, I just want to thank you again. One of the things that I know about you and the feedback that we always get is just how caring and loving you truly are. So welcome, Jim, back again to the Couples Expert Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Hey, we were talking about something really fun and interesting to talk about, and the topic that we came up with, and I'm hearing this much more in my office anyway, where couples are coming in with sexual issues, but it's not so much the sexual issues of desire, but the issue tends to be around how to resolve differences in sexual needs, but that sometimes they're fighting more and more about sex. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah. It's interesting. I kind of want to do something here, flip this a little bit. You tell me more about what you're experiencing. Maybe I can interview you to get us started.
Okay.
What are you hearing from people?
Well, I think what I'm hearing is that The conflicts that occur are that when people have different needs in a sexual relationship, and how do you really communicate that in a way that's loving and caring? And sometimes there isn't even a clear understanding about why I'm not feeling as turned on as I once might have been. And that I'm still attracted to the partner, but there seems to be a lot of difference in how do we define what each of us needs in a sexual relationship? And how do we talk about it in a way that has both people still feeling attracted to one another and desired by their partner? So desire, I guess, is still part of the issue, but how do we have that emotional connection? And sometimes people, and I've been thinking about this a lot, that even if you have an emotional connection, that doesn't always translate as easily that our sex life is going to be okay unless we focus on that as well.
So you find yourself sort of, I'm trying to think about how to help couples with this. I see their distress. I can't quite figure out why things have changed with my partner and I. And this is talking about differences in sexual needs, and maybe it's sort of falling off. The frequency and quality and the sexual intimacy is kind of just going down from a previously better place. Am I getting that?
Yes. And I think sometimes when I think about the concept of being vulnerable sexually, it's also in the mix there, because if we have good communication outside the bedroom, that doesn't always mean that the communication inside the bedroom is going to be good as well. So that if...
Like, I hear you. I think it's, it's fun. I was just thinking about like that with, like money. And when you go to, I used to, my previous counseling office was in a bank, in the bank building, right? And you walk by the bank to go to the elevator, you could see the bank, and there's this sort of energy in a bank, quiet. You don't get loud at a bank. Money's a very private thing, and people don't come in and say, I want to take out $10,000.
Right.
And actually it impacted all the residents of the office building were very, people didn't say hi to each other much. And I moved a while back to another office building, and everybody, how are you? What do you do? And I'm like, what's different here? And I'm like, oh, there's not this bank that the first floor that everybody kind of walks by, and we see all the people through the glass lobby, and we can see everybody sort of uptight. And yeah, there's this thing, sex. How many people have role modeling for really vulnerable talk during a sexual experience? And it's funny. I asked a couple, I think you'd like this, Stuart. I asked a couple the other day, I said, can you tell me a movie or a television show where the couple used a scene where a couple's being both sexual and emotionally intimate together, right? And they both started saying no. And then the fellow said, oh yeah, there's this Stars show called Outlander. And Jamie and he calls her Sassenach. They get rather emotionally intimate too sometimes when they're sexual. And he says, I think that's what you're talking about. You should watch the show. So I went to watch it, and I was like, oh my gosh, an actual role model of you can be intimate and excited and sexual at the same time, vulnerable. I think you're right. It's really hard for us to be vulnerable emotionally while sexual, and to be vulnerable about our sexual preferences and ideas and fantasies and needs and stuff. I don't think it's, I remember Dr. Ruth a while back, and she's, but hers was more getting comfortable saying like clitoris, and
right.
It was okay. It was a start.
Right.
But I don't remember her talking about this vulnerability that you're talking about. I don't know how many people listening, can relate to that. Like, did you to have vulnerable conversations and learn about that sex can be an intimate thing on a lot of different levels, not just physically?
Today's podcast is sponsored by Stuart's Daily Notes. I want to tell you about a service I offer for my subscribers. It's called Stuart's Daily Notes. If you could do one small thing every day to be a better person and partner, a small change that will make your relationship more loving, secure, and connected, would you do it? Why wouldn't you? My purpose in creating Stuart's Daily Notes is to give you short clips, tips, and advice in your email inbox every weekday that will do just that, all for $9.99 a month. 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year. You can do something positive and meaningful to make your relationship stronger and more fulfilling. Subscribe to Stuart's Daily Notes and start making that transformation in yourself, your life, and your marriage today. And I think part of the teaching is, how do you define what sex is?
Yeah.
So often what I hear in my office of people really having a synonymous feeling that being sexual equals intercourse, and that if you don't have intercourse, then you really haven't had sex.
All roads, yeah. Versus, to be intimate about it, I think one of the best things in my relationship with my wife, and we've been together married almost 32 years and together like almost 35 years. Somewhere early in our relationship, we used to, what I would call back in the day, or my parents would have called like neck or make out. Mm-hmm. We would kiss and talk and nuzzle, and it wouldn't lead to intercourse. And it was so intimate. I don't know how we stumbled into it, because we both talk about like we didn't really experience that with other people before, and I'm not that we had all that much experience, but and I think about that, like there is that sort of the all roads lead to intercourse, and if this contact doesn't lead to intercourse, it's not sex. But what about kissing? Kissing is, I mean, the scientists talk about that's more intimate than intercourse.
Right. And if you ask couples, when is the last, long-term married couples, when's the last, as you were saying, when is the last time you actually made out with your wife or husband? Mm-hmm. Most people can't remember.
Yeah. Do you talk during sex other than making grunting sounds or, saying, oh my God, I'm going to come, like, and you'll get these blank looks, right? Or,
I think even a better question is, are your eyes open?
Are your eyes open is another example.
Are you looking at your partner in loving, caring ways when you're having sex with them?
Yeah.
Or do you shut your eyes, and does that mean that you're present? Or does that mean that you're just paying attention to what your body is responding to? And then if it's bothering you, do you ask your partner in the middle of having sex to please open their eyes? Because you need that.
Yeah. See, I think it's sort of like, even now, I'm like, how intimate do we want our conversation to be as couples therapists and people about how sex is talked about and experienced and stuff? This is like an edgy thing in our culture, I think, that we have. There's all sorts of images constantly that are sexualized and about physical in the culture. I think about like crime procedural shows that are all over the States, and now I know from my Netflix account they're all over like British television, so they're probably all over French television too. And these, stunningly attractive people trying to solve crimes, and it's like, why are people really watching these shows? Are they watching them because of the crimes procedural, or because these stunningly beautiful people have all signed up to be FBI agents?
Right.
And you can, magazine racks that are at the checkout stand at the grocery store that are all, with Cosmo saying 99 ways to have sex, but then the couples themselves can't talk about it.
Right. And then, I mean, you and I had a conversation about talking a little bit about pornography, and what message does the pornography that sometimes people watch, what does that do in terms of having healthy sexuality? And does the appearance of the models on the pornography, if people participate and watch pornography, what message does that send them about what their own sex life might be or not is?
Yeah, well, things like the handyman can come over and the woman sends a cue and they get sexual really quick, and it's really purely about physical desire, and they're not talking much or intimate, and they go through some sequence that leads to orgasm, and the person leaves. It's a very cut off sort of sex is what I imagine people get out of that, right? It's physically oriented towards the sensations, time limited, and outside of the context of a bigger relationship.
Right. And when the movies that we watch that have a sexual connotation, does it have the emotional intimacy?
Right. That's what I was asking that couple, right? And that's when the guy said you should check out Outlander. And I was like, I'm not. And it's not a plug for Outlander, guys. It's a complicated show, and there's some things about it. Some of the ways they just depict some violence and sexual assault and stuff that's tough to watch. But the emotional intimacy that these two lead characters will express with each other is really kind of stands out as like, there isn't a lot of that, what you just described.
Right. And I think another aspect of this is you were talking about us as a couples therapist talking about sex and our sex lives. And one of the things that I have heard from a lot of couples, and I experienced in my own life and my own sexual relationship with my wife, is that as I aged, as a man, I needed more emotional intimacy to be able to maintain an erection.
Mm-hmm.
And that women in my office who I've seen who are in the older, sort of our generation, I guess we're the older generation now, I guess, but are saying that they are more satisfied today than they were with their partners when they were in the 20s, because their partners now take more time in foreplay and in working on the emotional intimacy, because without that, they're not able to achieve an erection in the same way that they used to be.
That's right.
So they're now better lovers.
You're really getting at, I think, that and I think in some of my experience in my office, millennials having a different experience of this where they can come to each other a bit more vulnerably from the start. And I don't want to say that for all millennials, but I do see something about the equality in the relationships, and they're not as caught up in some of their sort of gender stereotypes and the young. So right now I'll talk about it in heterosexual relationships, but I think this is true in gay and lesbian relationships too, that both partners are better able to embody both vulnerability and emotional intimacy in the sexual relationship, and they're more comfortable with expression of the physical desires and things that are coming up within that relationship. That it's not that it's up to the woman to kind of carry the emotional vulnerability, and the man is, bringing in the sexual. I just got to have it. There's a more balance. And I think what you're talking about is, for our generation, as we aged, it's like, wow, I like affection, and affection is tied to whether I want to do this or not. Mm-hmm. And we slow down and we're more in the experience, and it's a whole experience with a partner where I want my eyes to be open because I want to see her, or I want to be with her, I want to be connected with her during this experience.
Right.
And if somebody's listening to this saying, wow, what do you mean by that? Do you mean like, so I'm with my wife or my husband, and what am I doing? Does that mean like talking to them about how much I've missed them, how important they are to me, how special it feels to have this physical intimacy, to be inside you, or to have you inside me, or if we're, a lesbian couple, to be, touching each other in this way, or you to be doing this for me down there. It feels so special, and to be talking about these things where it's not just about the physical sensations, It's about the meaning of being able to do this with each other, to have this special kind of play, this special kind of intimacy with each other. That even as I talk about it in this way, a way that I would talk to couples with, I just had this moment of, oh my God, I'm saying this on a podcast. Is this too much? Am I crossing some boundary?
Right.
I could just feel it just happen.
Yeah, I know. I mean, even when I was talking, as I was sharing about my own sex life, all of a sudden what happened to me in my head is, oh my God, what's my wife going to think that I've now shared this to all these people?
Yeah, Patrice is on this podcast with me. I got to be careful. She's gonna. You didn't tell him about the thing we did in Gibraltar, on the beach.
That's right.
Hey, people, we've never been to Gibraltar on the beach. Don't worry. But yeah, you're not gonna let too much of this out. But I would say, I know if my wife was here, she would be advocating for this too, and it's changed for her too. That
right.
The trust and I do think that you said something at the very beginning, that sometimes it seems like the connection, emotional safety and connection doesn't necessarily lead to a more satisfying sex experience. And
right.
I think I like what you said then about that people can be learning how to be intimate emotionally, but they don't bring it into their physical sexual intimacy.
Right.
I think that's what's happening. What some people like Esther Perel are identifying as, you have to have novelty and difference and distance in order to have sexual charge. I don't find that with my couples. I don't find that in my experience with my wife. But to protect Patrice's end and everybody else stick with couples. I find that it's, wow, you've helped, you do this thing like Stuart, where we primarily work from this attachment-based emotional bonds, emotionally focused therapy. We're feeling safe with each other, but it hasn't translated over to our sex life. And then I start saying, well, let's talk about sex and your sex life and sexual intimacy, and they freeze.
Right. They don't know how do we talk about it?
And then it doesn't take much prompting once they feel safe with each other. And then they start to bring that safety into the bedroom or the couch or the out in the country, in a field or wherever, because there you go again, bedroom is there's my implicit sort of assumption about sex, like you said, that's intercourse or it's in a bedroom. It's, we can be making love, walking down the street in Hawaii, holding hands, talking to each other, about how special it is to be on vacation together. And it may get sort of come to a consummation later in private in a bedroom. I don't want to lose sight of that idea that you shared, which I think is so powerful, that to expand what is being sexually intimate with each other, expand the length and duration of a sexual experience with each other, and start to open up and share more with each other about what you like and don't like, and to have open eyes like you talked about. And to when I'm with my partner and I start feeling like, my God, I'm so lucky to be with you or something, I can say that during sex. It's okay. It's actually, my partner will probably like it.
Right. And that there's nobody else I'd rather do this with than you.
Yeah, there you go. Now you talk.
And that it's okay also if we're not having a good time to say today's not a good day.
Yeah, and then we can have average sexual experiences with each other that are just okay.
Right.
It doesn't always have to be. That's the other thing, I think, either movies or porn, both, that if it's not wall socket, scratches on the back, screaming,
right,
multiple orgasms, that it's a disappointment. Whereas, what was your actual experience with each other? Did you have a pleasant experience? If you go to a restaurant, you don't expect every restaurant to be a 5-star restaurant. It's a decent, I had a nice pizza. So right.
I can't wait for the day that I see this incredibly romantic scene in a movie where the guy and the woman are getting so passionate, and the guy stops in the middle and says, "Hold on a second. I have to take my Viagra.
Yeah, there you go. I gotta take that.
And we have to wait 30 minutes now.
Right.
And then to be able to have that experience and say to each other, this was the most romantic, sexy time that we've ever had.
Right.
So that we begin to really treat each other as people.
People having an experience and sharing an experience and being able to talk about it. And I like what you said, like the way you described looking at your partner,
Right.
talking about it with kind, caring heart, but also a little bit more open with each other about what you like and don't like, and and maybe you want to hear something like, I want to hear that you find me to be a good lover. That would be meaningful to me. Or I want to know that you've missed this because we haven't done this for a few weeks or something. Or,
right.
And would it be okay for us to have, a little phone sex when you travel a lot and I miss you and could we flirt with each other on the phone and maybe, do some things on what can we explore what's possible between us in that safety can be very exciting. And we don't have to put a wall between us or create distance between us to do that.
And not have a conflict over it's got to be one way or the other, and that it can be role playing, it could be just doing a massage, it could be just oral sex, and that be enough.
Right, exactly.
That it's about the playfulness, it's about having a playful, fun experience with someone who you see as your best friend, and whatever we do is sufficient because we're doing it together.
Right. And it takes the pressure off, I think. It's
yes.
Then the paradox, you take the pressure off and then you find yourself having deeper, more intimate, this combination of like the sexual passion with this vulnerability and emotional intimacy. And then it's like, wow, that was really, really special. And we're holding each other in a different way. And hey, maybe next time it won't be 5-star restaurant quality. It'll be pizza, and that's okay too.
Right.
Because we're keeping that. I think that's one of the things too that you see this, there's a momentum sort of aspect to it. Couples who come in and it just sort of fell to the wayside, and we got to where it was once a month, it was once every 2 months, it was once every 3 months, and it's been like 2 years. There is something to keeping some momentum going, that there is this thing called a sex life that we had together, however we define it and think about it. And it deserves attention, and we have to nurture it and sort of water it. And like you said, be playful about it. And I find one is, I think when I was younger and I was first a therapist, I thought this was crazy, but the couples who get something out of scheduling sex.
Right.
It says something, right? It's like, hey, on Friday nights, we have sex and,
right.
barring like 4 circumstances, fever, headache, the kids won't go to sleep, and something else. And if that happens, and we try to have sex on Saturday or Sunday, that's okay too. Like different approaches. I don't like it when therapists or these experts go out and tell people this is the approach,
Right.
And you got to approach it this way. Work together to find what works. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. And I think the whole concept of people having such a negative aspect of scheduling your sex life is a really interesting topic for discussion, because I think that most of us live in this pace every week, every month, every day, that unless we pay attention to it, and some of us work best with schedules.
Yes, if it's like the old Covey used to say, if it's not in your daytime, or maybe it's not important to you. So by us putting it in our shared, Google Calendar or something, we're saying something to each other.
Right. And I think I was reading something somewhere recently that said couples who don't report that they have an active sex life generally don't report they have a satisfying marriage.
That's right.
So that if you are going a week, a month, 6 months, I had someone the other day come in and said they hadn't had sex in 5 years.
Yeah, that's right.
And when I asked them, do they want to? And they both said yes. And I said, then why aren't you doing it? I said, we're exhausted.
Right.
And after a while, it just got to a place where it just was not on our radar anymore.
Right.
And now coming in to see me, talking about their relationship and the emotional intimacy, it begins to get back on their radar, and we have to then get reacquainted. And getting reacquainted is about scheduling time to have a date night.
Right.
But a date night doesn't have to be a sex night, but a date night is emotional closeness. And if you're open to sexuality, generally you want to play naked.
Yeah.
And it comes back slowly, but you have to be paying attention to it. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that we are so busy and distracted, and it's an easy thing to let go to the wayside. Also, it seems like a lot of couples I work with don't talk about their sexual intimacy, their sex life. They're outside of maybe getting into fights about it.
Right.
Or they avoid it. And they don't have sort of like meta conversations about it. And we know from, some of the research that couples who tend to be happier also have sort of they have what they call meta conversations about their relationship. They stop and talk about how their relationship is going. They take a step out a bit of the content.
Right.
And I think I've found that, and I think my wife would attest to this, and a lot of the couple I've worked with, is some of the more difficult aspects of your sexual intimacy or things you want to share about your sexuality with your partner are sometimes best shared outside of a potential or an actual sexual intimate time when you're having a sexual encounter with each other. Now, I'm not talking about something as specific as like your hands are really rough. Could you put some lotion on them? I mean, that's a timing thing. But, I feel like our oral sex is unbalanced.
Right.
And it doesn't feel fair to me, is often better talked about away from your, getting intimate with each other and sort of communicating directly or indirectly about whether there's going to be oral sex tonight, for example. I want to go back to what you said about frequency. I think I heard Barry McCarthy say this, but I've heard it from other people, the statistic that, for people listening, what is the average sort of number of, sexual encounters that couples are having in a marriage or a long-term relationship, a committed relationship, and what is sort of the sweet spot. And it really he's coming back to about once a week. People are, depending how busy they are and what's going on in their lives and stuff, are having sex somewhere between like once every 5 days and once every 14 days. And those couples, if they have that sort of once a week kind of average, will feel good about their sex life. And more than that, pushing for and trying to have sex 2, 3, 4 times a week the evidence seems to be that if that's not happening spontaneously, that really doesn't help the marriage. The people don't feel any more satisfied by having lots more sex, and they'll feel a pressure often. They start feeling disappointed that we only had sex 3 times this week. And I think it's, just knowing that, the average couple isn't having sex 5 times a week or something. You're not somehow way off the mark if you have sex on the average maybe every 10 days or 2 weeks and you're in your 30s or something. It doesn't mean. And married couples are most often in the research having more sex than single people. Contrary to sort of and are generally more satisfied with their sexual experience than single people. And I think a lot of married couples will walk around with a sort of, we don't have it as good as those free single people who can go out there and just do it when they want to and have all this novelty and exploration. But
yeah, most single people I know wish they had a married partner when it comes to, because you have someone right there. And yes, it may not be as frequently at times, but to have a steady partner who if you can say that you're having sex on a regular basis, once a week, twice a week, that to me is what most people really want, because it's a pace that you can really keep up without it feeling like it's a chore.
It's a chore, right? And I think a lot of people can relate to that when it becomes a part of a to-do list rather than an opportunity. There's a big difference between if we schedule it on Friday night and we're both looking forward to it and we're going to help each other warm up to it and be playful in it. And I've agreed to it. And to me, it's a chore. It's an obligation. I'm giving in or something. And I think this is a big part of the intimate discussion that often doesn't happen with couples, gay or straight, is what is my experience of how you approach me for when you want to have sex, you're not sure if I do, how you see me when we're having sex, how you talk to me and about me during sex, and to know when I'm in a space that it's okay if I'm an object, it's okay if you tell me my butt looks great, and when I don't want to be an object, I need to know that I'm your intimate partner,
right?
And I'm not just an object. I'm not property or something. I don't owe you this. I'm not obligated.
Right. I actually had a couple this evening. One of the conversations we were having was that he has been talking about wanting more sex and she wanting more emotional intimacy. And every time he gave her something emotional, he expected them to have sex, that it took away totally for her that this was freely given.
It becomes that quid pro quo type stuff.
Yep. And it totally shut her down.
Right.
And stopped her feeling like she was making love. And it was more about, I have to do this.
Right, I have to do this.
And no one wants to have a relationship like that.
When our body parts don't respond very well to that kind of, our hearts don't grow closer together. I think when we're more in sync with each other.
And I think another topic that might be worth talking about here in our last few minutes may be a little bit about aging. And I think I heard the other day from a couple that made me really sad. And it was, she was talking about, she was experiencing painful intercourse. And she did not feel that she could tell her husband that she was having pain during intercourse because she had this fear of his leaving her.
Right.
Because of this happening, and they weren't able to have a dialogue that this might be an easy solution for the two of them, so that rather than share vulnerably with him that her body was changing, it was like rubbing against sandpaper for her. And she was just tolerating it. And we talked a great deal about that and how awful that must be for her. And I think so many couples don't talk about as their bodies change and what do we need to do differently now than we may have done 10, 20 years ago to maintain the sexual excitement, the sexual satisfaction.
Yeah, like other things evolve, right? When we were 25, we used to do this when we had time on a Saturday. And then we went through, if we had kids, we went through raising the kids. And then we used to, downhill ski. And now, the knees don't really let us downhill ski. So we take, we go on walks instead. And, we play cards instead of, and so why wouldn't our physical, sexual, emotional intimacy around our bodies evolve and change? And I think that piggybacks, Stuart, on your idea of, playing around with what you define as sex and not comparing it to something in the past or something you think other people are doing, and to what you as a couple, what we're doing at this age and stage in our life. And I find, and the research supports it, that people in their 60s and 70s into their 80s are often very satisfied with their sex lives. They are having something that's sexual for them. And yes, it may have been 18 years ago the last time they had sexual intercourse because they couldn't find a physical solution to the sandpaper phenomenon, and they went in a different direction, like, the oral sex, or just kissing and saying, I feel sexy with you right now, and it's not going to result in intercourse, but it still feels good. Still feels good to share this with you, and I've been with you a long time now, or I'm so happy that I had a second chance, that I met you in my 60s or 70s, and because I lost my first partner, or I'm divorced or something, and I get to rediscover this with you. I love that you brought that up. I think it seems like the whole theme to this conversation is maybe it's bringing sex out of the bedroom or out of wherever we sort of decided or grew up or were influenced by something like movies, or the lack of talking about it in our families, or pornography, or whatever the influence is, or our gender or sexual orientation sort of implied, you're supposed to be this way, you're supposed to be that way. That we get to discover our sexuality and share things with our partner. And we want a partner that's going to celebrate our sexuality and share theirs back. And then we get to rub these two sexualities together and mix them up. And we discover a third thing, which is our sexuality.
Right.
This thing we share together, and it's going to evolve and it's going to change. And the emotional, intimate part of it, all the research and the experiences when I talk to clients and stuff, the excitement of that can continue to evolve and deepen even as our bodies change is a wonderful, loving, magical adventure. Let's enjoy it while we can.
Right. And throw the rules out the door.
Yeah.
That there aren't any rules. I mean, one of the more recent topics that have been coming up, and it's not recent, but that I seem to be hearing more, is people being so upset about who initiates the sex.
Right.
And it becomes more important than whether you're having sex.
Yeah. Maybe one of you tends to be the initiator and one of you tends to be the receiver. And if you're both really happy.
If you both want to do it, why not just enjoy it?
Yeah.
And not worry about that.
The one exception that I think is the dignity thing, right? As a couple, if you're out there listening and you're really exploring, and you run up against something where you say to your partner, I'd really like to role play something, and your partner's, that's okay, let's try role playing. And then you suggest something, they're like, nah, wow, that's hitting me at a dignity level. I don't want to pretend to be that. Or the one I've had, probably the most common one in my 20 plus years of doing couples therapy, is anal sex.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking that the anal sex is a big
couples, one. That's fine. It's perfectly fine. And then you'll get somebody who says, it's just for me. It's just, I don't know why, but physically, and I don't want to do it. And it gets to like a personal dignity thing. And I need that to be respected.
Right.
Now, don't throw the dignity card out every time your partner just suggests something that you're like a little uncertain about, and it sounds a little risque, and you grew up very sort of, I don't know what my parents would think about it. Forget your parents.
Right.
Forget the people that, but you do want to remember that. And I think the other is what we didn't talk about, maybe that's a whole other topic, is what to do with our sex lives and sexuality when we've been victims of sexual abuse.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a whole different kind of conversation.
And maybe I can come back to that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
In a couple months we can talk, because I think that's one.
Yeah, I think I like doing that. But the other aspect about having certain sexual practices that you're just not interested, what I like to make sure that people understand is if your partner offers to do something like anal sex, just because we were talking about that, and they aren't interested, the response you should get shouldn't just be no. It should be, no, I'm not comfortable with this, but let's try this with an alternative. It's about an experience. It's not about each incident, but you can't just shut someone down and expect then it's over.
Exactly.
So you say, I'm not interested, so now we're not going to do anything.
It's exploring and yes.
It's about having a fun, loving, caring, vulnerable, emotionally connected, physically touchy experience for two people who love each other, who want to please each other, who want to have an experience with their partner that they don't share with anybody else, and that it's just the two of you just enjoying the feelings, emotions, and sensations that sexuality brings you. That's what we want.
And you get to decide what brings you enjoyment together, what physical things you like together. You get to this mutually created thing and enjoy the adventure. And if you're reading something out there and it makes you feel pressured or bad about something that you're experiencing that you and your partner enjoy or brings you closer or is fun or playful, trust yourself.
Right. And trust your partner that both of you want the same things, which is just to feel loved and important to each other.
Right.
Thank you, Jim, for joining with us again on the podcast. It's always fun to have you. And
my pleasure.
And maybe in a couple of months we can do something on that exact topic, because I really would like to do that. So
well, I'd love to do that. And thank you for this. These podcasts you cover so many topics and cover them so thoroughly with so many different people, so many different perspectives that couples can kind of, take what they like and leave the rest. And
right.
We need to resource these primary relationships that are often so stressed in our busy times. And so thank you, Stuart.
My pleasure. And thank you all of you for coming in and joining us once again on the Couples Expert Podcast. Take care now. And please, as always, stay connected. Bye-bye now.
Thank you for listening. This episode has ended, but your journey continues. Head over to www.thecouplesexperts.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive to podcast listeners. Enjoyed this episode? Why not hit subscribe now and never miss an episode?